welcome everybody to the Coastal Virginia CRS Workgroup. It's great to see everyone in person and see folks online. If you are having issues hearing me, please use the chat, and Madison will be monitoring the chat. And we're going to do workgroup meeting introductions. And what we'll do is we'll hear from the people in person first, and then we'll move to the folks online. And online people, I will call on you. Please unmute yourself and do your introduction. We're going to do names, locality, or organization affiliation. If you are with a locality, please state your role in the locality and what CRS class rating you are. And if there's an update on your class rating, if you've cycled and you haven't heard yet, just a brief update on where you are. So, Mary Carson Stiff, I'm the policy director at Wetlands Watch, and I am not with a locality, but I've just recently helped Gloucester County do an open space review, and we're hoping to get them at a class 5. Okay, Madison.
Can y'all hear me? Madison, can y'all hear me? Okay. I think I see a shaking head for Mark. So my name is Madison here. I'm the program associate with Wetlands Watch, and I've been helping out Mary Carson with the work groups since I started with Wetlands Watch. And I'll turn it over to Ross.
Ross Weaver, also Wetlands Watch. Hey, y'all.
And we can start from this side of the room, and then we'll work that way. Let's move the.
So you have to hit the, it's going to be where the, I can, you have to hit the sensors at the front.
Like this.
Yes, that's probably. I need to go a little further up.
Give us one moment, folks. Still getting used to the hybrid meeting now.
Yeah, we should probably, in the future, we should probably.
All right, so go ahead.
I'm Deirdre Wells with James City County. I'm the chief civil engineer doing mainly stormwater review and stormwater related floodplain review. And I will let my coworker give us all the updates on the county.
I'm Mike Wilson, section chief for James City County for resource protection, in charge of the CRS program, among other things, including Chesapeake and wetlands. And we are a class 5 community. I believe that's everything you requested, Mary Carson.
Yes, sir, you're good.
Howard Nelson.
CFM.
Oh, recent CFM, yeah.
And a recent CFM.
Howard Nelson, City of Newport News, GIS specialist, CFM. We are class 7 will be official in April.
Kathy Engel, supervisor stormwater engineering, also Newport News, and we're very still excited about finally coming in at a class 7. It's been years, so. Yeah.
Then we can go this way.
Today is Skinner City, so we're not in the program. We are evaluating, and so I'm just excited to be here, just trying to learn more about the program. I'm the assistant director of community development.
Michael Zanger, I'm the environmental programs director with the Berkeley Group. We work on behalf of GWRC and Middle Peninsula. Immediately prior to my job here, I was with the town of Nags Head, and we just went from a class 6 to a class 5 in the last year.
Great, it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And so for those of y'all who knew and still know Denise Nelson with the Berkeley Group, Michael is Denise's replacement. And glad that you came from Nags Head I don't know if you participated in any of our work group stuff, but Holly White has been in our meetings here and there for a number of years, and I've worked with her a little bit.
I miss having her on my team.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. Okay, online. I'm a little rusty at this. Okay, let's go Bobby and Rob, Chesapeake first.
Good morning, Bobby Gentleman, and to my right, your left probably is Rob Braidwood. So Rob's a coordinator of emergency management. I'm a planner in OEM. We do like 1% CRS stuff. We just are like the ones that collate all the information and send everything in. We recently moved to a class 7. So that was a big hurdle for us. We were very close to a class 6. There was some stuff that we missed stormwater wise. We'll talk about that when we do our presentation. And I think that was it. Mary Carson, you're muted. Assuming.
I just muted him. Yourself. You shouldn't have
Technology.
Okay, Tom, can you unmute yourself or are you confined to chat?
Hi, if the phone is unmuted, I'm on the phone line as well. Tom Brokenborough, Accomack County, GIS coordinator and floodplain administrator, currently a class 6. We're waiting the results of our cycle visit currently. See if we'll stay a 6 or slide back to a 7.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Ashley.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley Gordon. I'm a coastal analyst with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission in Chesapeake.
Bruce. Bruce Herbert.
Good morning. I'm Bruce Herbert. I'm Community Development Coordinator with the Accomack Northampton Planning District Commission. I'm a CFM, and I assist with our mitigation for our flood elevation.
Let's do David.
David Jurgens with the City of Chesapeake Public Utilities Director. For me, CRS usually means can't remember.
Never heard that. Absolutely.
I like it.
Awesome.
And I'm here more representing utilities as a group from HRPDC than I am representing the City of Chesapeake.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, David. And thank you, Bruce, excuse me. Dannon.
Good morning, Dannon O'Connell, CFM and Senior Planner for the City of Charlottesville, and we are not in CRS yet.
Yes, awesome. Good to see you. Good to hear you, Dannon. Elizabeth. Or Liz.
Hi, let's start my video. Hi, I'm Liz Thurber. I'm with Arlington County. I'm the CRS coordinator, the floodplain administrator, and the stormwater infrastructure program manager. And we're a class 8, and we just got our notification that we were, from our verification visit. We're dearly hanging on to 8 because we don't have a lot of open space where you get a lot of credits, and we have some issues with our building official. So I am not a CFM.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Jenny.
Hi, this is Jenny Sneed. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble turning on my camera and my mute at the same time. There we go. I am with A. Morton Thomas, a consulting firm, and I work with localities, some of whom are on this call, about CRS issues getting into the program, and also with annual recertification and all things CRS.
Cool. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Schmidt. I'm with Verisk ISO, and I'm the CRS specialist handling the Virginia community case files for the 5-year cycle visits. So hopefully I can answer some questions if you have them. And I've enjoyed working with several of you so far, and I look forward to working with more of you in the future.
Thank you, Emily. Let's see, Greta.
Hi, this is Greta. Sorry, I'm on like 2 different calls. This is Greta, the City of Hampton. We are a class 7 and we are finishing up our cycle visit with Emily right now, seeing if we can move up a little bit. And I am a CFM.
Thanks, Greta. Mark. Mark.
He has no mic.
Oh, Mark voted. Oh, no mic. And he posted in the chat. Okay. Whitney.
Hey guys, Whitney McNamara, City of Virginia Beach, Floodplain Administrator and CRS Coordinator, and I am a CFM, and we are a Class 7 community.
Thank you, Whitney. Nora.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am a resiliency planner with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, just recently started, and I am bringing together some floodplain management folks and emergency managers and stormwater people for a regional working group up here. So I'm just here to listen and learn.
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
Sorry, I think Mark Cluck doesn't have a mic, but Mark Bowden should be.
Oh, Mark Bowden. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Mark Biden, Town of Shingatig, CBO, CFM. We're currently 8.
Thank you. Zach.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a reporter working on a story for WHRO about sea level rise in the coastal plain, specifically implications for on-site septic. Hope it's okay. I'm just observing a little bit today. Colleagues sent me a link to this. And yeah, thanks for letting me shadow.
Okay, thanks for being here. Daryl.
Yeah, so hopefully it won't be too noisy right now. I'm an environmental consultant. I live in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and I'm a CFM and a professional wetland scientist. We are a CRS Class 9 in Morgan County.
Thank you for being here. Excellent to have a West Virginian on the call. Okay, was that everybody? Who did I miss? Oh, hi.
Yeah, good morning. Hi, Trent, and engineer and CRS coordinator for City of Newport News. We are entering class 7.
Okay, great. Did anybody not go? Oh, Deborah Rose. Okay, you should see a poll that is on your online on the Zoom. Please answer the poll if you would like CECs. We typically earn 1.5 CECs for every work group meeting, but you have to answer. Oh, 100% answered. Awesome. Deborah Rose just joined us. Deborah, would you like to introduce yourself and your affiliation, and if you're with the locality, what CRS class you are? Deborah, are you there?
Just turn her camera on.
Okay. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, Deborah, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. I'm going to stop the poll. 63% are CFMs. I think that's pretty awesome. As everybody is aware, if you are local government and you'd like access to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund resources for project-based monies, you need to be a certified floodplain manager. You have to have a certified floodplain manager on the staff.
Our Zoom meeting dates, should actually just say meeting dates now. I forgot to update that. We are in person and on Zoom, and eventually we're gonna figure all this stuff out and it's gonna be smooth sailing. This is creepy that it's turning towards me, that's fine. But we're gonna be in the James room, in person, same thing, last Wednesday of the month, unless it's a holiday like this month. In which case we do it 1 week earlier. So Wednesday, 11 to noon. The CFM CECs, I mentioned this, we have been successful in getting continuing education credits for all of our CFMs for every single meeting for a while now. And we'll continue to do that. And I just haven't submitted for the last two. I like to do it in bunches and batches for the ASFPM. So it's the Association of State Floodplain Managers that approves all of the continuing education credits, and that's why we do this polling, and it's kind of a pain.
Mary Carson?
Yes.
To specify, are those the 2022 dates?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And so you might want to, so now that we're just doing your presentation, we might want to unmute you now and then just turn this off so you know go.
Okay. Okay, Deborah Rose. Thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself in the chat or come off of mute? And we also had one other person just join us. No, I think Nora was already on. Danielle Curtis. Danielle or Deborah, if you want to introduce yourself. You can do it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, we did our poll. The Virginia Floodplain Managers Association, or Management Association, VFMA, we are a state chapter of the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I serve on the board, and this is our bi-monthly plug for the VFMA. Joining is very inexpensive. You should definitely join if you're a CFM. We are having our annual conference very soon, December 2nd and 3rd. Registration is available online, and maybe Madison can put a link in the chat, just at vaflood.org. You can get the link. Encourage everybody to join our annual conference. It'll be virtual conference. Our ISO Virginia representative, Emily, is on the call today. Emily tries to join all of our meetings and is at surprisingly many of them. Emily, thank you for being here. And as always, Emily is available for your questions. If you have them in the chat, if she has to jump off before we do our report outs, please feel free to do so. And if anybody in the room has a question for her, we can interrupt the presentation at any time. Thanks, Emily. Okay, without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Bobby and Rob from the city of Chesapeake. They're going to be talking about their recent cycle visit. This is all part of our work group's initiative, lessons learned. You can find all of the lessons learned documents, presentations, and then correlating documentation on our website, coastalvacrs.com. So definitely check that out if you have time. All right, Bobby, I'm gonna stop sharing and move it. They weren't even seeing my screen.
Let me see how, let's see. Let's start my slideshow. Share screen.
They weren't even seeing my screen earlier.
Are you seeing that now, Mary Carson?
You knew that?
All right, can you see it?
Yes, we're seeing your screen,
Okay.
yes.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, Mary Carson, I just want to say, so, Bobby, obviously took a lead role in getting this thing done. It was an interesting verification visit for us. I think there's an ISO person our new ISO person, I think, is on this call, correct, Mary Carson?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, we had some staffing issues with ISO during this process. So any negative comments that Bobby makes related to ISO is not related to the person that's on this call, whoever that person is.
Good to clarify. Thank you. Emily will not be offended.
Yes. All right, so just a kind of a quick run through of our verification visit, or V-Day as we like to call it. So the timeline leading up to the verification visit. So for any of you that have not been through this process, it's very long, and for someone that for departments that or individuals that have multiple other duties and assignments, it can help, it can hinder it because it's so long, it can kind of fall off the radar. So as you can see, starting here in December of 2018 is when we got the first email that we would be notified of the verification visit to be scheduled at the end of 2019. So, and you'll see the little red arrow, and I've noted to start pulling your documentation ASAP. So if you're a locality that does not have a CRS coordinator, that's, someone like Whitney, I like using her because she does a phenomenal job at the beach. She's also a member of our NEMAC committee. She does this on the daily. So, for those that don't do it, I highly recommend that you start pulling your documentation and you start working on keeping documentation year round, whether it be both electronically or in print format. So the first part of it, the elevation certificates were due for review in February of 2019. We did get some inaccurate information. There was a lull in correspondence. We actually did not end up submitting these until a couple months later. So we weren't penalized for that. They realized that they had some inaccurate emails and that sort of thing. So, and then plus being a locality that has a tremendous amount of building in the floodplain, we had a lot of elevation certificates that needed to be turned in. And they wanted them all the way back from when we first started, when we joined the program. And September of 2019 is when we got the first email to request a date to set up when they would come. We also, I had information that went out on the crosswalk, the CRS crosswalk document. That's a good piece of information to use to send out to various departments that do any type of work that's related to CRS. So basically what I did is I took that document, I assigned it for a department, and then I sent it out and then kind of gave them a timeline to start when I needed to have everything brought in. And then we originally were going to be, they wanted to schedule it for December, and we got them to push it to January. Just December was too tough of a time of year, just with holidays and people taking leave and that sort of thing. So we pushed it to after the first of the year. And then I set up a timeline and a schedule for each department that had turned in materials for them to come and meet with our ISO specialist. So, and then moving forward in February of 2020 is when we received our 30-day letter. So the 30-day letter, if you don't know, is basically you have 30 days to turn in additional required documentation. And when I got this, thinking that, our meeting in January went fairly well. I felt like we had turned everything in that we needed to. And then lo and behold, in February, I get an email and with a document that's 7 pages long of additional materials I had to turn in. So that's something just to kind of keep on your radar. And part of it was our specialist was very hard to read. We really couldn't tell if what we were turning in was good or not. And then come to find out, we had to have a fair amount of additional information or materials to turn in.
And then also go back to that slide, Bobby. So also just for the group's edification, does anybody else know what was happening in February of 2020? So it was obviously the start of the ramping up of the global pandemic. So yet another, this is a problem that we have in Chesapeake, is that the CRS coordination and coordinator lies in the emergency management office. So, this is right when in February, we were averaging about 7 to 10 meetings a day on COVID, but also trying to follow up with this 30-day letter. So for us, it's an organizational problem we have in Chesapeake, having emergency management oversee CRS, because, if something more important than CRS comes along, that's what we're working on. So like COVID or, the protests or whatever it was that happened in right in and around 2020. So for us, that's a big problem that we're trying to solve long-term, is, maybe trying to share that with another department, so that if we get taken offline like we did for COVID, that CRS keeps moving forward.
So this next slide is just kind of a breakdown of what we did for the verification visit. You can kind of see, we knew the gentleman was going to be here all day. So just kind of broke it up by departments. We started off ourselves in OEM and kind of went through everything that we dealt with first, and then broke it out into public works, doing stormwater management and some of the other public works activities. We even bought them lunch to try to grease the skids a little bit. I don't know if that really helped or not, and then after lunch, we went into our review of some of the ECs and permits, our higher regulation stuff. And then at the end of the day, we went over our map info, open space, and our flood data. And then, as always, we had kind of our IT, our PubCom people on standby if we needed anything from them. So just highly recommend you kind of break it out like this. It's just kind of easier. And actually sent this to the specialist as well and said, hey, this is how we're going to do things on the day. And he agreed to it. So it worked out perfectly. So he kind of knew on his side an agenda as far as what to expect that day. So some of the learning opportunities that we had, and you kind of hear this a lot, both in public safety and really with CRS, is be very specific in your documentation, label everything. Obviously, everything's done by activity, but the more that you can break it down, I know in previous presentations about lessons learned, people have used like OneDrive or SharePoint or that sort of thing, and then doing everything in folders. And that's exactly what I did. I took everything, I broke it down, I created on our SharePoint site a specific page for CRS, and then we had departments that could easily go in, dump that information in there. And then the nice thing about SharePoint too is you can set it up. When you set up folders, it will send you a notification so that you can kind of go in and look and see who's submitted stuff. You can go and take a look at it. If they need to tweak anything, you can have them do it fairly early on. Regarding open space, I highly recommend any planning staff and GIS staff work directly with the ISO specialist. The language that they spoke was Greek to me, so I learned early on I needed to just kind of get out of the way and not be the moderator or the middleman, and just have them work directly with one another. It kind of simplified things, after several emails back and forth for them to work on it. The next bullet. So we actually had in our public works department some contracting staff that actually had their CFM designation. I highly recommend getting them involved, especially in activities 450 and 540. That was instrumental for us. They were actually later on, after we had submitted all of our documentation, there was some stuff we did not get credit for. We had an individual that was a contractor staff that actually helped us. They're working on some stuff now so that moving forward, we'll actually get credit for stuff that we're doing that's being done by the city. It just wasn't documented. and we failed to get credit for that. As always, submit as much documentation early as possible. Throw everything that you can at them. You know, if they don't like it, or if you're not going to get credit for it, they're going to let you know, and that's fine. And then you can kind of keep a checklist and take that out for the next visit. And then again, have any, for us, development permits, they house and manage all of our elevation certificates. Having them work directly with the ISO specialist was huge. We ran into several issues, and I apologize. I got caught up in a couple other things this morning. I was going to go back and look at some of the issues that we had, but I can do this at a later date and send it to Mary Carson. But we had several issues just with correspondence, with doing we had used a web link for them to access the ECs. We had to send the ECs to them 3 different times before they fully got all of them, because we had so many of them, and that really slowed down the process. So again, I highly recommend the staff that deals with elevation certificates work directly with the ISO specialists. We actually had some site visits that needed to be done, where he had to go out and look at some drainage, and we did not get that stuff scheduled ahead of time. So I highly recommend that if there's going to be any type of site visits that need to be done around your locality, to schedule them early on, so that individuals in various departments, or if it's offsite, if it's at a private facility or whatever, that they're aware ahead of time. I kind of talked about this before about the setting up the SharePoint site and space. Again, having the departments responsible, they submit their information themselves. I also printed all of our documents for easy reference. I'm very, what's the word you have to say? How I manage stuff. OCD, thank you. So I printed everything. I had like a huge binder all ready to go. I mean, I should have got points just on like how good it looked, but they don't give points for that. So it's a shame, but I printed everything out so that he had both everything electronically and in print format. Don't go anywhere else. The next one is rep loss data.
Oh.
So this is something that's been an ongoing issue, basically from FEMA on down. We still we're part of the Hampton Roads Hazard Mitigation Plan. We're trying to do the update to that. We can't even get updated rep loss data for that. We were told to use data from 2018. It just we had
no. We were given 2018 data after a 9-month application process to get our list. At one point during the application process to get our list, they discovered a mistake on their form, made us correct their form, and then send it back to them for signature. So that's like the level of bureaucracy that needs to get fixed on this. I don't understand why, because of the Privacy Act, they keep citing the Privacy Act, but I don't understand why a locality can't get more regular and frequent rep loss data when it drives so many of our planning decisions, but that's just my editorial.
Yeah, so as you get ready for your visit, the sooner that you can try to request this data, and if you can get it, the better off you'll be. So one point, this last point is something I had thought of, and maybe it could be through this work group, is if there's a locality that's going to do a verification visit and you're up next, see if you can kind of shadow them, and just so you can kind of see what goes through the process. If I could have been a fly on the wall or sat over, looked over someone's shoulder as far as what goes on during the visit, it would have shed a whole lot more light on what to expect. You can kind of look in the manual and it tells you some stuff, but in all honesty, it simply does not really prepare you for what you're going to battle and what you're going to do. So maybe this can kind of be an outcome or an outfall from this presentation and working through the work group to maybe try to do something like that. So just some additional notes. So in September 2020 is when we received word from the ISO specialist that we would have a rate change from an 8 to a 7. And then we didn't get our official notification until February of 2021. Two other things, and this is something that we're going to try to work on moving forward as long as we still continue to house CRS and OEM, is try to find an intern that can work on data collection, work on your documentation, pull as much stuff. If you can find, someone that's, trying to specialize in floodplain management, bring them in, have them help you out with the CRS process. And then lastly, really try to make sure that all your city departments know what CRS is and how they can contribute. We found out that there's certain things that like the libraries were doing as far as the pamphlets and information that they were putting out that we could get credit for. They didn't even, they were doing it. We knew they were doing it, but they didn't even realize what CRS was and how they can kind of contribute to us getting credit. These last couple slides are basically just a breakdown of our scoring. I'm not going to go through each one, but you can kind of see how we did. And then I have the final score sheet on the last page, but and not having a reference, I can't tell you as far as someone that's like Mary Carson that's more apt than I am can kind of say, how many points you can get per activity, what's your total, or what your total is, excuse me. So one big area that we did want to increase on was our open space. I think we're able to do that. As I mentioned before, we did leave some points on the table under 450. And then the other one I mentioned was 540. We actually didn't get any credit for that. And that's some stuff that we're working on in the future to try to get credit for. So, and then lastly is our cumulative score sheet. Now, I'm a sports guy, and the way I look at numbers, I feel like you have to have like a physics degree to understand how CRS scoring is done sometimes. I really wish that they would change this so that it's just, just whole numbers, not doing any type of calculations. I think it would just be an easier way to kind of understand the scoring, but that's my own personal opinion. But this is where we ended up as far as a class 7 goes. And with that, I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
I have some questions. Shocking.
Darn it.
Okay, so, okay, I have one question, and then I have some comments. So the crosswalk, Bobby, that you made for your staff, like the staff in Chesapeake that were associated with each relevant activity, is that something that you would be willing to share with folks? Is it, just, each different activity and then a corresponding contact name? How does that work?
Yeah, so basically whatever the activity was, whoever kind of housed that, would house that information, or I needed to get that information from, I just went in and added their name to it, the department, and then I sent a blast email to everyone that was included, and I'll gladly share that with everyone, and said, hey, this is what you're responsible for. So like some of the open space stuff went to GIS, it went to our GIS department for the city, and then went to GIS and planning. Like the elevation certificates go into development permits, some of the stormwater stuff go into public works. And it just gave those individuals, and then I copied their department heads so that they knew what was going on and what they would be working on. And then it just kind of gives them, some guidance and timeline as far as like, hey, I need this information for a visit, and you're responsible for doing that. So it just kind of helped define who needed to do what and when they needed to do it.
And you used, I'd love to see that. I think that might be helpful for the group, especially using it with the crosswalk. I think that's interesting. I haven't seen how that would be.
Yeah. And part of it for me is kind of like, one, me being OCD, and then two, because I have so many other duties, and because we're housing CRS and OEM, it just was easier to do it that way and to divvy it up, who was responsible for what. So
yeah, I think that's great. And in the CRS trainings that I've been doing, and Suffolk got one of them, we had an organizational chart. It was sort of broken out by big activity. It wasn't that, I don't think it sounds like it's as specific as what you've created. So it'd be great to see that.
Okay. All right, I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool. That also helps kind of make the case and let everybody know that it's a group effort and not just on the shoulders of the CRS coordinator, which we know has been a problem for CRS communities in the past.
Right, absolutely. Emily, you look like you can ask a question.
There's just a couple things that I wanted to clarify for moving forward, and I am sorry that you had such an issue with your ECs. We have recognized that has been an ongoing issue, and so that was part of what got changed in the 2021 addendum. It just happened that your visit was the year before the addendum went into effect, but moving forward, starting this year and moving forward, it should be much easier and more consistent for the elevation certificates and construction certificates submittal. We're no longer going to be asking for the 5-year period back to your prior cycle visit. You're only going to be submitting those construction certificates annually in your Virginia's 3rd quarter, so during your annual recertification, and it will only ever be the 1-year period.
Okay.
So that'll be much easier. They will be scored for that 90% accuracy every single year. We're not going to take points from the activity 310. You used to get the impact adjusted. How many of the 38 points did you get based on what percentage were correct during our first review? We've replaced that with something that we're calling a construction certificate management procedures document that outlines what your process is, which certificates you require, who's responsible for collecting and reviewing and storing them, that kind of thing. And I have a template for that if anybody wants it. But you'll get those full 38 points for activity 310 moving forward. And that 90% correctness will be at each year's submittal. So you won't ever have to go back to the 5-year chunk of certificates anymore.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that you will always get an email from our resource specialist June 15th, and they will always be due August 1st. If you submit them a little early, we're not going to come back the following year and say, well, you submitted by July 15th. Where's those 2 weeks of ECs? We're not getting that picky. The August 1st to August 1st, kind of a time frame. So hopefully that will make things much smoother moving forward. Additionally, if you want to talk with me about a potential modification, because I saw that you didn't get 320 and didn't max out 330 outreach, or do the 360 public protection or property protection advice and advice after a site visit. Those are ones that, depending on how you do your publicity for them, you really can max out credit pretty easily. So if you want to talk, that might be a pathway towards a modification for you.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
And in terms of the timeline for Virginia communities, I like your idea of potentially doing shadow visits. I only have one left for this year, and nobody in Virginia is scheduled for their 5-year visit in 2022. So I don't know that we'll have any necessarily coming up. But the way that I have found works best for me as a specialist is to have that initial conversation with the community to set the expected cycle visit date, and then get you the visit notice letter, which we also call a crosswalk. So I'm not sure if that's the same as your crosswalk or if it's something different. It's a letter, and yes, my letters do tend to be longer, but I do that as a, maybe it's 10 to 12 pages, but it's as a bulleted list with checkpoints that can take you back to the manual as needed. It's structured based on what you previously got credit for. And then I also include, based on our initial conversation, if you're looking to increase a class, I'll include potential new activities and what would be needed for those. And then I have either bi-weekly or monthly check-in calls leading up to the visit with each community to kind of work on particular activities at a time, so that we don't get to the visit and have had no conversations prior to that. So hopefully that method will work better for feeling like the communities are being supported by our staff. But I am sorry that you had such a troublesome time with your cycle visit.
No, that's all right. And I appreciate all that. And that's, that sounds like an awesome game plan moving forward. So, you know, everyone else that's on this, when you guys get to that point, it sounds like, you know, they'll be a lot more prepared than we were. So,
one other thing about the timeline, because of, and I know you had mentioned how long it took between when you had your visit, when you got your draft expectation results from us, and then you got your FEMA letter for the effective date. FEMA only has those two effective dates, the April 1st and October 1st each year. And leading up to those dates, they have to have their review after hours. And then once their review is done, it has to go through all the process to have it implemented by the insurance company so that they can apply the discounts. So there's a very long, it's usually about 8 months before the effective date that we have already finished our touching of those community files. So yes, it can absolutely take a while to get the actual results. And there's very little that I can do to affect that other than just trying to get things closed out as quickly as I can. But
yeah,
yes, my best to not have them be 2-year-long time frames for you guys. I want to do my best to help support you and make your program more more manageable and more maintainable.
right. No, thank you. Now, I just wanted to let everyone, you know, to set the precedent, like it's not something you're going to hear back in a week or a couple of weeks or a month. You know, it obviously takes a little bit of time, and especially when you're dealing with different levels of government. So, but that's all. I mean, no fault to you guys.
Yeah, and like y'all's title says, you are the CRS coordinators. It's not necessarily something that you're expected to do all on your own. A lot of those other activities are done by those other departments, like you said. So as the coordinator, pulling them in and making sure they realize that they're involved is a big part of making sure that that's all working smoothly across your community.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I love the idea of doing the shadowed verification visit. I think that is such a good idea. And I wonder, Emily, you said there's one more that's cycling in 2021. Who is that?
Stafford County is cycling this Friday.
Oh, a little last minute.
Well, in terms of that December timeline, they are working to make sure that we have all of our visits in a given year prior to the Thanksgiving week moving forward, so that we don't have that issue again.
Yeah.
And that leaves December open for people who had a hurricane issue that need to reschedule and keep it in that particular cycle year. Then we could potentially do a December visit. I had
Well,
something I was gonna say, but I can't remember it.
Do you think that we could get a little kind of schedule going, you and me, Emily, well, I guess there's no one is scheduled for 2022. So would you be doing the scheduling for 2023?
Well, so I have my schedule of communities for 2022 because I handle both Virginia and Georgia communities. And I've got a couple randoms to fill out my workload for 22 since Virginia has none cycling. But that doesn't mean that we won't necessarily have a new application, or we might have some communities reach out to me to do a modification. That is always something that might happen for a Virginia community in 2022. I just don't know who those might be yet because they're not on a pre-scripted schedule.
Okay, well, maybe that's something that we can coordinate on, and we can kind of send out notifications. Do localities feel like that would be helpful to be able to listen in? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I audited Chincoteague, Mark's on the line. Of course, it wasn't Mark, it was Bill, maybe Neville. I audited Chincoteagues years ago, and it's what gave me the insight to so much of this stuff. I think it really makes a big difference. Okay, cool. And then my other question was, not a question, a comment. Oh no, back to my questions, just kidding. All right, so my brain, was there, Bobby, was there no back and forth between the ISO agent and you and other Chesapeake staff on like checking documentation to ensure that it was going to work? Because I know that Emily, you've been really good about doing that in advance. I'm just wondering, you know, if that's a standard ISO representative thing, or if you're just very, you know, patient and willing to provide that review.
Some specialists like to have everything at once before they touch a file. My brain doesn't work that way. And so I would rather discuss the activities one by one with the community, and with everything being virtual and all of the files being digital now, being virtual because of COVID, it has just made it a lot more manageable for me to say, all right, first call after we go over everything you did last time around, and everything after that, send me documents, I'll look over it and we can discuss it on a check-in call. And it just breaks it up. I usually offer 2-hour check-in calls every other week leading up to the meeting. And then by the time the meeting comes around, we've gotten most of the documentation to me. I've had a chance to look at it and discuss it with the community. None of us have gotten Zoom fatigue from more than 2 hours at a time. And we can just kind of run through, these are all the pieces that you've sent me, what you're pursuing now, this is your program overall. You're roughly this close to the next class. Do you want to keep doing more pieces to get to that next class, or are you comfortable where you are now? And we'll just close out that file. For me, that has worked much better, but I know that not all the specialists do it that way. So anytime a community is pleased with this particular method, feel free to send it in writing to my supervisors, and we'll just kind of build up that expectation of maybe we should move all the specialists in that way. But it's really, I didn't do it in my 2020 files that way, and they were much more painful to close out. I was a specialist in 2020 and in training. And so when 2021 came around and I had all my Virginia communities, I said, we're not doing that method anymore. I'm not waiting to get everything to start looking at it. I'd rather look at it with you guys and not get that Zoom fatigue.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
Mary Carson, go ahead.
One other thing I did want to tell the group is that we do offer courtesy reviews for some of those larger needing to be adopted type activities. So prior to adoption for your hazard mitigation plan, or prior to submittal for some other complicated submittal that needs a checklist type item, we do offer courtesy reviews. I don't reach out to you, but if you send me an email and say, hey, we'd like to submit this activity for courtesy review to see where we stand, see if we're missing anything. We do offer to do those reviews, but you have to reach out to me to tell me. I can't contact all of my communities and say, hey, do you have anything you want to submit for a courtesy review?
So MC, one thing like Emily was talking about, it was the exact opposite as far as what we got. It was just dump everything to the very upload site, whatever it is, and they'll take a look at it, you know, before the visit. And where I feel like if you go the route, or we had gone the route like Emily's talking about, we probably would be at a class 6. We probably could have gotten some more credits. We would have had the documentation that we needed for some other stuff. And Emily, I'm gonna send you some emails that came from our public works department about some stuff that they were doing, they weren't documenting, but where basically the last specialist said, no, absolutely, you're not getting credit for it. We really feel like we're doing it, you know, and I don't think it was documented properly, whatever the case may be, but, you know, it might be something down the road where we can, you know, definitely get credit for. So I feel like the way that you have it scheduled out is huge. The other thing too, so for a community like ours, or locality like ours that doesn't do CRS every day, by having something on your calendar every other week, every 2 weeks, whatever the case may be, that puts you in a position that you actually have to work on this stuff. So you can't just bullshit it and push it off until, you know, a month before and try to pull it all together. Whereas you can, you know, you have to physically, it's on your calendar, you have to work on it, and then you're not, you know, I'm not wasting 2 hours of your time on the phone. So.
Right. And if somebody didn't have anything to send me and they didn't have any questions pulled together for their scheduled check-in call, I would just remind them that, hey, now you have 2 hours set aside in your calendar. You can pick an activity and work on it. Don't get overwhelmed by all of them on the letter. Just pick one, focus on it for your 2 hours, and call me if you have questions, because I don't have anything else on my calendar in those 2 hours. I'll work on something else, but I'll be available.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
I put a question in the chat just to get people's juices flowing. Thanks, Tom, for your response. You know, this repetitive loss issue is like a national problem. Every single freaking conference that I'm on, it's like, oh, repetitive loss data, I can't get it. What a nightmare, blah, blah, blah. And I'm glad to see that Tom got a response and saying just to go with the 2018 list. Is there any localities that have had a good experience getting data, any issues in the opposite direction, which I obviously assume that there would be?
We didn't have terrible issues with that in access.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
And got more recent than 2018?
As far as I recall, I can check.
Yeah.
That wasn't a sticking point. So a lot of what was said kind of is consistent with our experience. I mean, of course, it was a smaller organization. So, you know, Holly was our CRS coordinator. Everything was really managed in-house.
Right.
In terms of everything. I think the biggest lesson is, it's good to hear that, you know, the ECs, that there's a change in terms of how those are being collected, because that was a little bit of a, but that highlighted, I think, the importance of ongoing record keeping and making sure that you have all the critical pieces of information ready and setting up those processes to do that. And then I think the biggest thing for us was confirmation of the success of, you know, our regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
You know, once we moved from a 6 to a 5, we were able to quantify the insurance savings, and, you know, no one can argue with that. I mean, it was almost $250,000 over the next 5 years that we could save.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, and like Virginia Beach is saving over $1 million every year.
Yeah, right. Right, and I mean, next that you've got, you know, 4,100 odd residential structures. So, and we had just had a map update as well. So a significant number of those were going removed from the flood, regulated floodplain.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's okay, Emily, that all of the communities are using old or repetitive loss data?
Obviously, it's not ideal, but we know that you have no control of when you get that data. And we know that FEMA is going through a restructuring on how that's being handled and processed. So they also were hit with that COVID issue when all of that was starting to transition. So we are not holding up any of our files due to older rep loss data. We are accepting you using your best available data. And if that is 3 or 4 years old, we understand. I usually like to verify that the community has at least requested their updated list. Our only real, I mean, it's obviously not ideal to put all that work into an older list when you know there have been changes. If you've had big storms and you know that there have been changes, or you've done a lot of mitigation work and you know that some of those should no longer be on there. But yes, we are accepting those older lists, knowing that we are in a period of transition and that you just don't have access to that updated data right now. I've been recommending communities either put it as a annual or biannual kind of thing on their calendar to just request it so that they know it's done and it's off their mental load. And when you get it, great. And if you haven't, then at least the next time it's on your calendar, a reminder comes up and you can resubmit to ask again. Because that's just a lot easier in my head than saying, all right, I realize we had 3 big storms, and so we probably got some new rep loss properties. My head just doesn't track the storm dates that way. So having a set time of, all right, well, this month every year, I'm just going to check and see if I can ask for my new list. Then my list won't ever be more than however long it takes them to get me. But we know that it's not ideal right now, and we anticipate that FEMA is working on that. I have no control over it. I know you guys don't have control over it.
Yeah. Sufficient answer.
The one thing we'll say for new application communities, just push FEMA to, when you're doing your community assistance visit, to get that list so that you have it to do your work for us. I've had 1 or 2 cases where a community had been category A with no rep losses, and now they are category B with 1 or 2. And for those, they didn't have anything before. So their most recent best available list is nothing. But if they wanted to go ahead and draft the rep loss letter and make some estimated based on where they know flooding in the area has happened, they could make some draft rep loss areas and work on those. But we're not going to hold them to it because their best available list is nothing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Emily. Yeah. Greta, I saw I saw you had your hand up. I don't know if it's still up.
Well, I put it down, but I wanted to say that we're still finishing up our cycle visit with Emily, and in my opinion, it went really well. We've finished everything for where we stand right now, and she's given me more time to submit additional documentation to hopefully move us up a class. So her method of doing the visits and getting the documentation and reviewing it and really helping you figure out the best ways to do things to get the most credits in the most efficient ways has been very helpful for me. And I'm hoping to put together our CRS program and everything we submitted into a kind of like James City County did, into a program plan. So we'll have a CRS program plan with everything we do and the credits that we get for them. So it's a little bit easier next time when we have our next 5-year cycle visit.
That is great, Greta. Really good. Thank you.
And also, we're also having trouble getting our rep loss data. Ours is like super old, and I've been trying to figure out the stuff from the forms that we have to submit and try to get the new data requested.
Okay. And Liz just posted in the chat that Angela Davis, who is with the Department of Conservation and Recreation Floodplains, is going to be putting out guidance in a newsletter that DCR Floodplain sends out. If you do not receive DCR Floodplains communications regarding, the Flood Fridays or this newsletter that Liz is talking about, please email Angela. Do you have her email? Could we put that in the chat? That'd be great. We're going to put it in the chat. Email Angela and make sure you're receiving all that, those notices that go out, so you can stay on top of it. Thank you, Liz. Any other questions for Bobby and Rob? Thank you all so much for presenting Chesapeake. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
Oh, you're sweet. Okay. Okay, so we're working it. We're doing it. We're figuring it out. All right, so I walked away carrying this laptop and it disconnected the share screen. So it's absolutely my fault, my bad. That happened earlier. And so here are the 2022 Zoom meeting dates. I've just had a million errors. You guys really feeling rusty here. So 2022 Zoom meeting dates, they're listed on the screen. They are also on the CRS Workgroup website that Madison included in the chat. So you can see that information there. And then Angela Davis's email has also just been posted in the chat. People in the room, I'm going to leave that chat up. Okay, so we did the poll. This was the Virginia Floodplain Management Association call for membership, and then our annual conference notification that was on the screen that no one on Zoom saw. Madison also included the link to register for the VFMA conference in the chat. If you are a CFM, I didn't really say this, you should absolutely register for this conference. It's a reduced rate because it's online and virtual, it's not in person. And you can get, I think we're at 12 CECs for 2 days. So this is a lot of CECs for a very low cost. You need 17 CECs every 2 years. Yes. Deirdre.
You also have Madison email a link to register.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, right, because you can't see it, of course. Tom Brokenbrough says, are Flood Fridays still going on? I heard they were canceled. So I heard that they were starting back up. Anyone can confirm that in the room? Maybe they haven't yet.
Yeah, they're doing them
ask Angela when they will be starting up. That might be a good incentive to get it going.
This is Liz Berber.
The other issue with posting this, so I will post the PowerPoints. In the past couple meetings, we've had some time sensitive things. I've posted the PowerPoint presentations that have all the links embedded, like the next day or same day. So if I don't send around the email, it is always posted on the website available. And you can go to vaflood.org. Wow, vaflood.org. And there should be a big conference registration link on the homepage. Okay, Emily, this was Emily's information that was on the screen. And then we heard from Bobby and Rob. Thank you, Chesapeake, again. Okay, now we're gonna do a poll for all of our people to get CFMs, CECs. If you're in the room, you can see what people are voting on. This is intended to get everybody kind of jazzed up about presenting these cycle visits. I think that they're incredibly helpful for our work group membership to hear from others about how a cycle visit went so we can all improve our scores moving forward. Liz just said Flood Fridays are now quarterly, not monthly. Okay, so that's a little bit of a change. Very big change, actually. Okay, so I'm going to leave the poll up.
And now I want to talk about FEMA's recent request for information. Has anyone seen this? I think I've included a link on it. Okay, in my email. So if you'll recall, a couple months ago, FEMA released a request for information about how the CRS program could be improved. And we talked a little bit about that here in our meeting. This is a new request for information. FEMA's just wanted all the information from people. This is about how the minimum land use regulations for the National Flood Insurance Program could be updated. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The notice was published on the 10th of the 12th of October. The comment period closes on the 13th of December. And this was all started, this request for information was because the NRDC, Natural Resource Defense Council, and Association of State Floodplain Managers created a joint petition for rulemaking about how long it had been since the National Flood Insurance Program's minimum standards, the regulations that are in the Code of Federal Regulations, 60.3, hadn't been updated since the 70s. And it was really time, given all of our future conditions, problems that we're experiencing related to flooding, both increased rainfall intensity as well as sea level rise. It's time for these standards to be updated, was their petition's call. So FEMA certainly responded, and as we'll talk about, they actually expanded this call for information to include things beyond just those minimum standards. The bulk of the information that they're requesting is, however, still related to those minimum floodplain standards. So for everyone's refresher, these are the things that as National Flood Insurance Program participating communities, which you all are, obviously, you're in the CRS, and everyone in Virginia, with the exception of a couple communities, are in the NFIP. This is what communities agree to do when they join. And all the communities in Virginia, or the big majority of them, joined in the 70s and in the early 80s. And so you all did this, of course, not knowing, what you'd signed up for, because nobody was working there. But this is what you have agreed to do in exchange for getting the benefit of National Flood Insurance Program insurance coverage. So you agree to adopt FEMA's maps, you agree to adopt the minimum standards as outlined in the Code of Federal Regulation, and you agree to receive insurance. And that insurance is really important because it provides safety for people's ability to bounce back. And it also allows for our communities to receive financial aid from FEMA in the event that we experience a disaster. Non-NFIP participating communities don't get FEMA support like NFIP participating communities get. Okay, so I think it's important to kind of review what exactly it is we're talking about. The code, the US code, outlines the goals of these minimum floodplain standards. And the goals are to really limit development in areas of high flood risk, generally, where you can. And then to guide development away from the high flood risk areas, to reduce damage caused by flooding, and to help participating communities improve long-range land management and land use plans for these high flood risk areas. So these are the goals, right, as outlined in code. So from those goals, the Code of Federal Regulation has codified those minimum standards. And this is a very quick and dirty, list of some of the heavy hitters. You have to permit all construction or development. We in Virginia, we recall this development issue quite well, based off of all of that went on with City of Hampton and FEMA Region 3 compliance. So permitting all development. You have to review the development to ensure that it's reasonably safe from flooding. You agree to require that when new construction or substantially improved construction occurs, that those new and substantially improved structures will meet those newest, building code standards. So this is making sure buildings are built above the base flood elevation as opposed to below, which is very frequently the case before communities join the National Flood Insurance Program. Construction must withstand hydrostatic and hydrodynamic pressure. So flood vents obviously are going to help foundations not implode and fail. We talked about the lowest floor being, this is just the most important critical minimum standard according to, a lot of floodplain managers. Equipment must be elevated, all related to allowing structures to bounce back after a flood event occurs. And then, water course management and relocation is definitely a part of the NFIP minimum standards. And then the two kind of highest flood risk areas for riverine communities and coastal communities are also stipulated for how those highest risk areas should be managed in the minimum floodplain standards. Riverine, it's floodway, right? So how do we manage floodway development and how do we restrict it, more importantly? And then for coastal areas, it's the V zone, the velocity zones, and then now the new coastal A zone. So that area that's in between the regular floodplain and the velocity zones, areas in between, the wave heights. So as demarcated through the Limwa line on your map. So this is kind of what you all have agreed to do, and all communities that participate have to do it. So I think it's kind of interesting just to look at how we're doing with these minimum standards currently. Nationally, we have 70 to 85 percentage compliance for those minimum standards. That includes standards related to all those things, on that previous slide and then some. And then structural compliance, we're doing less well. So looking at just how compliant all of our structures are built. And, this is not a surprise. I hope for people that, this is kind of where we're performing, not ideal, but this is how we're doing with compliance. So back to the request for information. The RFIs requested, two big buckets of information from anybody. This is just like, a comment period that's open to people, residents, regular people who don't work in this field, and then obviously open to practitioners like you all in the room and online. FEMA has asked for information on how to revise these minimum standards to better align with current understandings of flood risk and flood risk reduction approaches. I think this is important. They want to bring our minimum standards into the present day. They haven't been revised since 1976. So it's about time that they were revisited. I mean, they're pretty strong standards, which I think is important to kind of point out, but time has changed and our future conditions and our increased risk is absolutely different than it was in 1976. So FEMA wants to see, as a result of these modifications to the minimum standards, safer, stronger, and more resilient communities. So that's their goal for the modification of the minimum standards. The second bucket of information that they're looking for is really not super related and kind of unusual, and it sort of throws people off when they're reading this stuff or reading the request. But they basically want to minimize the adverse impacts to threatened and endangered species and their habitats. So this is weird. Why is FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program caring about threatened and endangered species? But if you'll recall from Virginia, Gloucester County and James City County being the test bed for the new CRS credits for endangered species, this is all related to FEMA getting in some hot water related to the Endangered Species Act compliance. And so across all FEMA's programs, they're trying to beef up their endangered species protection. And so this is a way that they're going to try to do that as well through updates or tweaks to the minimum standards or to programs generally in the National Flood Insurance Program. So they've included those points in the CRS as one way to get at this. So that's what they're asked. That's why they're asking. Just a little bit of background. The RFI recommends that commenters focus on the things listed here on the slide. So they want specifics. They don't want comments like, well, the minimum standards are really hard to enforce. You know, that is a good comment in the sense that capacity is an issue, training is an issue, you know, certifications might be an issue, and access to trainings and certifications might be a problem. That would be a way to provide specifics rather than just, you know, complaining. They also want to see specific measures related to that threatened and endangered species request. They're looking for data on costs, burdens, and benefits of the existing requirements. So this gets to that capacity issue. There are some communities in our state where you go visit and you say, who's in charge of floodplains? And, you know, no one knows, right? And so this is getting to this issue of our communities in Virginia, and just like every other state across the US, it was the people working far long ago who were in charge of making the commitment to adhere to these minimum standards. And if that commitment hasn't been passed down, and if FEMA hasn't been providing those audits, those visits to the communities to ensure compliance, then things get forgotten and pushed to the wayside. And so it's just, you know, I think there's a lot of issues related to capacity in the National Flood Insurance Program minimum requirements in general. But they'd want to see real data. What is the best data that can look into the future? Because they are thinking about how to make sure their insurance pool is protected moving into the future. Specific data for protection of species. The way that the RFI is structured, they have listed questions that are related to the topics that I guess they're thinking about including in an update to the minimum standards, and then, you know, program policy and guidance generally. So I've listed them here. They're of course listed in the RFI, which is, you know, posted through the public register. You can see them in full. This is just an abbreviated version of the types of information that they're looking for. So this is a lot to digest. We've included some links for y'all that we have found to be most helpful. Obviously, the RFI details all this information. The ASFPM NRDC joint petition for rulemaking is really, really thorough and excellent. They list data sources. They provide examples for how a modification to the minimum standards could be enforced or could actually be implemented. So it's a really good reference guide. The Code of Federal Regulations that we're discussing, that FEMA is interested in taking a look at updating, is also linked here. So you can see the specific code or regulation for the land use criteria. And then finally, there's this just really awesome report that was, I'm just going to share the results of this poll. There was this really awesome report that was created in January of 2021, and it was created by the Congressional Research Service, very confusedly called the CRS. And if you all remember Diane Horn, she has an affiliation with Old Dominion University, and back in the day, she was attending our CRS Workgroup meetings at a time. I don't think anybody in this room was attending back then, but Diane is this really great kind of Hampton Roads connection, and she is one of the authors of this report. So she's very clued in on the CRS and the NFIP, and this report exposes quite a lot about compliance and how capacity issues are sort of plaguing the current administration of the NFIP minimum standards. So it's just interesting read, provides a lot of good, helpful background. So really, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of this request for information, and really get a sense of how you all are feeling about submitting comments. You know, not every community or individual wants to have public comments submitted, which is absolutely understandable. we are going to be submitting comments, and we've been having kind of small group discussions with floodplain managers from, from across kind of our east and sort of Gulf Coast. And Whitney McNamara and Matt Simons have been a part of those kind of small group discussions, and Kristen Owen as well. And so just kind of curious if you will have, the one thing that you would change about the minimum standards as they are today that you think would just be so important to help your community protect against flood damage or improve the way you're managing floodplains. Oh, actually, that's not for us, unfortunately. It's probably in the next room. I'm turning away a Panera order, people. It's hard to do. Sorry. Yes. I'm going to mute this. Okay, so we're going to do some kind of discussion about this if you guys are interested. Whitney has said the one thing that she would improve is to require planning in Freeburg to accommodate for future conditions, future sea level rise, so higher. Anything that y'all?
I think it's a tremendous benefit in that, because those of us who have localities that are part of the city's, floodplain, a lot isn't, to convince city leaders, it's a lot easier if it's in a regulation or a standard somewhere than to say, well, we really need to do this. and so yeah, I agree with Whitney.
That's good. Yeah, good point. Having it come from above is helpful. Anybody online, feel free to unmute yourself and contribute. Oh, Nora put another congressional report from Diane Horn. Oh, I haven't seen that. Diane, she's so prolific.
I saved it. So
you saved it. You love her. Anybody? Does it make you nervous that FEMA wants to update the minimum standards? Are you aware of the minimum standards? I think we should do a survey for the last time that FEMA provided a community assistance visit. Do like a statewide survey. I think it's been a really long time in other regions. No one from FEMA is on the call.
Hey, Mary Carson.
Hey, Ben.
This is Ben. Sorry, I was late to the party today. I think, one of the things we've talked about this before, but I think it still applies, and it is concerning to me at least, about these potential changes to the minimum standards, is that, still, in my mind at least, they're treating the riverine flood risk the same as they treat coastal flood risk, and the damage potential, the types of damage from different kinds of flood events are different. I think that different enough that it'd be worth exploring how they could come up with standards that would be appropriate to different circumstances.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that came up, a floodplain manager, I think in Florida raised that issue, if I'm recalling correctly. And it's interesting, there are specific standards for other unusual or unique coast hazards, right? Not necessarily coastal. Like there are specific regulations for high erosion areas. It makes perfect sense that there would be the ability or the flexibility to create coastal standards versus riverine standards. And in fact, I think a lot of communities would welcome that kind of change. There are, when this comes up, the communities that have both coastal and riverine say, well, that sounds confusing.
And so I don't know how you remedy that other than having separate flood zones, just like, you know, you do have separate zones according to risk. There'd be a coastal zone standard and a riverine zone standard. So enforcement and compliance, as Liz is noting, is difficult on its, you know, on its face. So it would just be a different level of complexity. A great point. All right. Anybody else?
I mean, I would just say there's a lot of variability across the states. I've worked in Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and Massachusetts. Prior to North Carolina, I worked in Massachusetts, and in the community I worked in, the state model prohibited construction in a regulated floodplain without a special permit, and then you had to meet a bunch of findings for the board to even, and it was a quasi-judicial permit. Whereas in North Carolina, it's, you know, as long as you elevate, you're fine, generally. So for whatever reason, coming down from FEMA to the state levels, there's so much variability in how the states are administering the program.
Yeah.
And a lot of inconsistency, and a lot of I mean, I would assume the CRS raters see the same thing.
Sure. Especially based on. Yep. Okay, I'm going to close this poll. If you're interested in seeing how people have answered. Okay, so now, I forgot I put this in here. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this because I'm so tired of talking about risk rating 2.0. But I don't want to gloss it over and be flip about it because obviously it's a big deal. We've heard a lot of concerns about how the rating methodology is working in practice, especially in coastal Virginia. I don't know if you've been in touch with insurance raters, agents and people who are actually putting in the algorithm and the new online platform and then spitting out, you know, the new rate. But we're seeing, have I already said this before? No, okay. We're seeing pre-firm structures go down in annual premium and post-firm structures go up. We're seeing homes like at Sandbridge with enclosed space below the BFE go down. And then homes in like, you know, sort of Norfolk regular flood zone with basements go up, or excuse me, not basements, excuse me, on crawl, go up, built at BFE or just a little below. So we're seeing some like kind of concerning things. A lot of the ratings are going down, which is a part of the, you know, risk rating 2.0 equity in action. The people in the Florida Keys are definitely not seeing their rates go down at all. People in Louisiana not seeing their rates go down at all. You know, so the like extreme high risk areas of coastal hazards in particular, their rates are going up like you would expect. But like our beach communities, you know, so far from running several, you know, not seeing an increase that's commensurate with the risk. Now, FEMA's always been weird about our dunes, especially at Sandbridge and Ocean View and the beach, Virginia Beach. So I don't know, you know, what really to say about that other than I think there are inconsistencies. One of the biggest inconsistencies that is causing a lot of our like mitigation friends, the mitigation community, the professionals that do flood vent installations, structural elevations, et cetera. They are particularly concerned because under risk rating 1.0, the old way, the mitigation measures could potentially reduce a premium by like
80%, right? 90%. It could just have dramatic savings, which is of course an incentive for people to make their structures more safe. The way that the risk rating 2.0 is rating based off of your first floor is creating problems for the rate. So essentially, they're rating on the floor that's above where it's first living floor, not first enclosed floor. So flood vents don't matter. And what we've heard from the FEMA actuarial guy is there's like a cap to the amount of flood insurance savings that mitigation measures will have, around 5%. So when running the numbers, flood vents don't end up reducing your premiums much. And then home elevations, like mega elevations with FEMA dollars, whatever, those premiums have been going up. So that makes sense with like proximity to water and a flood source and stuff like that. But the mitigation community is very upset and starting to articulate some of their concerns with FEMA. So I've also been on the phone with different agents. So obviously, there are companies that write flood insurance for people. Obviously, it's national flood insurance program. People are doing write your own. Those agents, the knowledge is varied. This has always been the case no matter what, but under risk rating 2.0, as you can imagine, this is creating like an additional level of disparity between agents and their knowledge. So having a hard time getting answers from agents. So I bring this up because it's really important for our floodplain managers and people who answer the phone when citizens call to be aware that there are concerns related to the rating. And from what we know, FEMA is aware of these concerns, has asked to see examples of how the ratings are not, what we would anticipate given all of the other documentation that FEMA's provided on risk rating 2.0. And they're reviewing it. We've also heard that the rates are changing like every week, like they're making adjustments to the rates as time progresses. And I don't know how they're doing that and how that affects, renewals and, if a home were obviously being put on the marketplace and how that works with a sale and then getting an adjustment after a new home owner has just bought it. I don't know how it's working in practice. I just know that we're getting a lot of phone calls about it. So that's all I have. I mean, if other people want to talk about it, put your comments in the chat, unmute yourself, whatever. TBD.
Hey, Mary Carson, this is Ashley.
So let's do work group report outs. And then if you want to talk about risk rating 2.0 in your report out, maybe that would be a good way to kind of structure the discussion. Let's start with our people online so we don't have to change the microphone. Feel free to unmute yourself and just contribute, or I can call on people individually. Gonna call on you. Okay. Ashley, what about PDC? HRPC?
Yes. Yeah, so we have a couple updates to share. One being related to our regional inventory of elevation certificates. Here, I can go ahead and turn my camera on real quick. There we go. So we have been collecting elevation certificates that have been completed within the last year. So thank you to those of you on the call who have been helping with that effort. We're in the process of reviewing those and entering the data into GIS and planning to update that online inventory that's available on hrgeo.org in December likely. So I can put a link to that data in the chat if anyone's unfamiliar with it. That data does help support qualifying for credit for the flood protection website under Activity 350 because it has a list of addresses where elevation certificates are available, even though the elevation certificates themselves aren't included, and also help support Activity 440 for flood data maintenance because the information from the elevation certificate is entered in a spatial format. So more to come on that, but I can put a link to the existing data in the chat. But once we have the new updates, I think we'll have over 5,000 elevation certificates in the inventory. And then our next Coastal Resiliency Committee meeting is going to be December 10th. That's a Friday at 10 a.m. on WebEx. And then Ben, I think, is also online. If there's anything you want to add, Ben, I missed.
Yeah, so we have shared previously some of the resilient stormwater design guidelines work that BDC has been working on. And the next version of that, I'm hoping to be sending out today. So that will include design title elevations and also precipitation values that account for climate projections. And my understanding is that that may actually be useful for some of the watershed master plans that are used for getting CRS credits, or there's some localities looking into. So just an FYI, keep your eyes out for that. And if that will be going out to the distribution list we use for our resiliency committee. So if you're not getting those emails and would like to, please let us know in the chat.
And real quick, Mary Carson, I did have one other question related to the risk rating 2.0 discussion. For the rates that you're seeing unexpected increases, I'm just curious, do you know if those are being based on actual elevation certificates, or are they relying on FEMA's methodology for estimating first floor elevation?
Yeah, good question. They are okay, so I think that one has used the EC and the others have been through just the online portal. It's like 6 questions that you fill out. But one has used the EC and they found the same result, an increase. And no one is sure how the different rating characteristics, like distance to water body, distance to coast, replacement cost value, estimated first floor. No one is sure how those factors are actually weighted. Even the spreadsheet that was sent out that is supposed to provide some guidance for how the factors are weighted. People who do deep dives cannot figure out how that is actually reflected in the rates. So we've gotten radio silence so far.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yep. Thank you, PDC. That's great about the stormwater designs. Ben, I'll include those in the email when they go out. Okay. Lots of communities saying they've got nothing going on. Let's see who else online. Jenny. Okay, if you're online, you're on your own.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was being called on. I don't have much to add to the discussion, but I do have a question for and I don't know how many people submitted for the last round of the DCR community flood preparedness grants. Do you know, Mary Carson, have you heard when people will be finding out? I did work with a number of communities on submitting this last round, and I'm wondering if you had any update on when those that will be awarded will be notified.
This is Madison Teeter with Wetlands Watch. We haven't heard anything about when communities will know about awards. We kind of estimated based on when they were due last time and when communities found out like the timeline. It looks like it should be around the beginning of December, but we've also heard from DCR that the third draft grant manual is expected to be released for public comment around that time as well. So it'll be interesting to see how both of those things roll out and if both actually come out within the first 2 weeks of December. But that is our estimates on that.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Hey, Jenny. So we're actually getting ready to brief our commission tomorrow on the CFPF, and I've got so there were 32 applications. That's what DCR sent to me from across the state. So, but no news on when they would be awarded.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're waiting. Yeah, and for this one, I was working with some localities across the state, so even Southwest Virginia. So that'll be interesting to see the comparison of, spatially within the state of who gets awarded funds for that.
Ben, you're presenting that tomorrow at the rec meeting?
At our commission board meeting.
Oh,
tomorrow.
excuse me. Okay, commission board meeting. Okay. Thank you. Okay, anybody else online? Last chance.
Is it correct that it's going to be the 17, 18 million plus the carryover from
correct
first round? So it's around 27-ish, 28-ish available now.
Yeah, it's always supposed to roll over.
That's what I hadn't seen anything on it, but that's what I have heard.
Yeah, it will. It is mandated to roll over. We just
Okay.
don't know if they will necessarily give out that amount of awards. Because there's nothing in code saying that they have to use all of it, but it will always remain in the fund as long as it's not used.
Okay.
So they don't have to use any amount of it at any
Right.
given time. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's gonna build quickly if they.
yeah, they don't start.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we're gonna do in-person updates. JCC.
This is Mike Wilson from James City. We did our annual recertification. We did get 100% on our ECs. We don't have nearly the volume as Chesapeake, but regardless, we're still 100% on that. And I did pass, as Deirdre stated earlier, did pass the CFM, so I'm newly minted CFM. Believe that is all the updates we have this quarter.
Great. Newport News.
We finally got our official letter. It takes them, like they just really long time, and like 3-4 months before they get the yes and the email to the official letter that goes to the city manager. So, but now we wait till April. So
That's so great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great, Suffolk. Yep. Berkeley.
Yep.
Okay.
I do want to add one last thing. Because I'm new as a CRS coordinator, I did talk to and email Emily extensively as county administration wanted some changes to our flood hazard letter that goes out to our citizens. And I wanted to make sure we weren't editing it out of the CRS crediting. And she was very patient and gave me a lot of great advice. And I would suggest to all the localities that they do reach out to her. She did make time, and she took the whole 2 hours. I wasn't expecting to call the last 2 hours, but she blocked out 2 hours for it, and she gave me 2 hours of time. Hi, Emily. I didn't realize you're still on the program.
That is good. Yes, anytime we edit those outreach projects, have to be so careful that all that messaging doesn't get lost. It's a lot of points.
Indeed.
Yep. Okay, anything else for the good of the group? I did Ross and Madison, did y'all have anything? Do we have anything?
Don't believe so. We'll let everyone know as soon as we hear about the draft grant manual for the third round for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. Like I said, we heard from Wendy Howard Cooper that it should be released in the beginning of December. We'll see if that sticks, because we know sometimes they've said things will come out and then it's a little bit later than that. But as soon as we get that, we'll send it out to everybody and we'll start drafting our own public comments that I'm sure we'll share with others like we have, like we did from the first time the grant manual was released.
Great. Good. All right, well, I'll make sure everything is posted online ASAP, and I'll send an email around with the stormwater design standards from HRPDC too. Great. Thank you. It's so nice to see you in person and faces online too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Bye, friends online.